Thank you so much for having me. It's my pleasure to be here in Paris, and pardon my French because I don't speak any. I was thinking about that these events mostly talk about the future, right? It's about what's coming. So I want you to take a little time travel with me and go first into the past, then into the present, and from there into the future, right? So I would like to just go into the history of maps and location intelligence and show you a few examples, and please follow me in this trip, right? So this map, which is very, very beautiful, is a map that the city of Imola tasked Leonardo da Vinci 500 years ago. They were under heavy attacks, and they said, well, let's see how we can defend ourselves better. It has a zenithal angle view, which was very unique for the time. And Leonardo gave, in this circular view, around 32 points of defense that could be used as cardinal ways to avoid attacks from outside from the city. A few years after that, in the city, was using the Mercator Projection, which is the one we use in the maps right now, is a projection that enables us to join 2 points with a single straight line, which is very useful for the sextant, for the navigation, for the sailors, right? So this map enabled actually the Netherlands to conquer all the area later on during the colonizations, and enabled them to do much more optimized routing. So already 500 years ago, optimal routing was a key thing. What you see here is a map that I love very much. This is an antecessor of Google Maps, I would say, right? This is one of the first linear maps showing points of interest along the route between Whitby to Durham, right? And interestingly enough, this map was at the time at scale, even being linear. Talking again about route optimization, this map is showing the way to go from Osaka to Nagasaki around more than 300 different islands, right? Again, how you could bring goods and do trade with other areas in an optimal fashion, even 300 or 400 years ago. And if we think about location intelligence, it's about putting things into context. And in his very famous ascent to El Chimborazo, Alexander von Humboldt was collecting all the species he was encountering, the altitude, and also the weather conditions. So he was really doing one of the first niche modelings and segmentation of the market, in this case for species distribution. And we at Carto come from that world, from biodiversity distribution, understanding how species evolve depending on the context, on weather, on temperature, on other species that could be attacking them. And then we are transforming this knowledge into business-oriented tasks. This map is particularly beautiful, but shows a very horrible story. In 1851, at that time, the oil of whales was being used to light the light lamps, right? It was the most powerful way of energy, source of energy. So Matthew Fontaine-Maury was able to discover a correlation between weather conditions and where different kinds of whales were around the world, which helped massively to optimize whale hunting and almost destroyed or make whales be extinct, right? Luckily, the oil refinery became much better over time. So then the main source of oil for light lamps was not anymore the whales, but oil taken from the wells. This map, already going to urban recognition, this map shows the, I would say, unofficial map of Chinatown, all the vice or vicious activities in Chinatown at the time, right? You can see in yellow the opium consumption, in pink gambling, and in blue and red the prostitution activities in the area, right? It was used to control Chinatown by the authorities in California in 1885. A city like London grew very fast at the late 19th century. So there was a big buckets of poverty and inequality, and location intelligence and maps can be used to understand it and actually then drive measures to correct that. So it was with this map by the philanthropist Charles Booth that it could understand where poverty was very big, and you see all the center or the blue areas are the buckets of poverty, and they could act against it. Another beautiful map with a very sad story, right? This is all the damages after the bombings in the Second World War in London, and it was used to then plan the reconstruction, how you can use location intelligence to identify which areas should be demolished and which areas should be rebuilt as soon as possible. And this map, also a very sad map, this is showing a bubble, a synthetic map of commuters running over black children in the city of Chicago in the 1971. And I want you to keep this in your mind because we're going to talk about this. This could change nowadays when we talk about the future. So we did a very quick 500 years journey in 3-4 minutes. And then I would say that, as you can see, maps and understanding the territory based on context and all the data sources has been with us for more than 500 years, right? But then in 1970s, what happens was the digitalization of maps, right? We entered in what we call a dark era. The maps became not anymore a domain of everybody, but a domain of experts. You had to go to college to study GIS. The tools were into the hands of a few companies only, and most of the usage was limited to military, to oil and gas, and to a few governments, right? So certainly a dark era for sharing information among everybody. And see what Al Gore was saying in 1992, 7 years before Google Maps came to be, right? Like the fact that we should all have this multi-resolution map in 3D of the whole world with a lot of contextual layers. And, well, he was kind of right? You see, this is the Carto offices in Madrid. This is the new Google Earth. That is pretty astonishing. So after many years, after this dark age of location intelligence and mapping, with two key factors, the fact that GPS was put into every smartphone and was made available commercially for everybody, and the fact that internet enabled the creation of new business models and new tools to put tools in the hands of everybody, is how we overcame this dark age. So now we're talking about the present, and the present is pretty exciting, right? I mean, all of you have a sensor in your hands. All of you are becoming, or have become already sensors. It's your mobile device, which tells you where you are, where you sleep, where you work. It's the credit card that is taking transactions, which tells people and tells everybody your consumer behavior. Or it's also the social media sentiment when you're tweeting about something in this conference or when you're posting something in Facebook, right? So humans are becoming sensors. And through that now we can use all this information, all these different disparate sources of information to understand behavioral patterns and to predict future behavioral patterns. You can use that inside of a mall, for example, to understand which are the flows of people, the past, current, and future flows of people around a mall, and understand which corners have a much better conversion rate so that you can place your products in the best places, right? Or you can understand what's, again, the impact of different kind of marketing campaigns in the flow. And we're talking about people, but it's also about the city. With such cheap sensors, $1 sensors, you can put a sensor into every street lamp, into every trash container, into every city bike in the city, right? So now you can use sensors to understand the city, right? It's not so much about the smart city, but how we can use that to make also smart citizens. You can use that also to understand when a trash bin should be replenished, when you should send the trucks, how you should optimize the routes of the trucks for the waste management system, or if the park is too hot and you should just put more water into the plants of the park, right? And all of that can be then shown visually, but also you can do predictions using machine learning to understand what is the future behavior of the sensor. So remember the map I told you to keep in your mind? This is probably the new version of that, right? Nowadays, with every car having a GPS sensor, with all the cars that are going to be taking much more information about what's happening around them, and also knowing from points of interest where are all the schools in the cities and where are the flows of movements of the children next to the schools, we could know which are the areas with higher probability of having a car overrun a kid next to a school and put measures in the city to avoid them to go that fast or to circumvent the traffic into other areas. So hopefully these maps, the one we saw in 1970s, will not happen in the future. And we're talking about people, we're talking about cities, but it's also about what's happening with the satellites, right? The digitalization of the sky. With all these Dove satellites, very cheap satellites costing less than $100,000 that are being done by the companies like Planet and Digital Globe and many others. we're going to be able to see and to get an imagery and video imagery of the whole world 24/7, right? And at a very accurate quality, right? I mean, a few years ago, the quality was still to be improved. Now, they were telling you a few years ago that you could see if a car in Walmart was open or closed. That was the key way of talking about accuracy. Now you can see if somebody is smoking a cigarette in the parking lot in Walmart, right? So the accuracy is getting very, very high, so you can start using that to understand human behavior in the whole world real time. So we're getting into this connected world, right? Into everybody and everything is connected to everything, where we see companies that know if you have left your partner even before you have told your parents because you start tweeting differently. But you can see if you are pregnant before you know you're pregnant and send you some goods to your house, right? So it's a bit of a dangerous and scary situation, also full of opportunities. So what we believe is this mantra that we hear all the time about data is the new oil. That should not be the case, right? Data should not be the new oil just in the hands of a few corporations, just under the control of a few. Data should be there for everybody to be used, right? We feel that this power of location needs to be unleashed again. And that's what we're trying to do at Carto, right? Now I become a bit more in my marketing pitch. So the idea is that we think that we need to put the tools and the data into the hands of non-experts. The people who run the businesses, the data analysts, the data scientists, the people who understand what they want to do with their businesses and have now no access either to the analysis or either to the data sources. And we live in a world of new data, more than before, more ways to explain the same behavior than ever before, with this real-time census that you can get from census data, from telco data and banking data, with new analysis being opened, and with new audiences that are interested into this, like these new data scientists or new data analysts. So how are we trying to do this at Carto? We do it with two ways. One is with our builder. Our builder is a self-service tool for data analysts and data scientists through drag and drop interfaces so that very easily they can connect the data sources, they can start adding the layers, adding analysis, enrich the data with other sources that we provide, and create actionable dashboards, and then can share this with the whole organization. In a way, it's like a geo business intelligence tool. But we also have the engine, right? Because we also want to have a product for developers so that you get access to all the full geospatial stack, and you can create your own custom applications, because there is no way we can see every potential use case that you may have. So we open all the performance of Carto through open, extensible APIs. And by the way, everything is open source so that you can develop your own applications on your own. And for sure, there needs to be data, right? Without the data, this will just be an empty shell. So most of our customers and users, and we have 1,200 customers, 300,000 users, to give you an idea of size. Most of them bring their own data for sure, enterprise data, where are the customers, where are the stores, where are the suppliers, but we also add other sources, right? From traffic data, from mapping data, the base maps, geocoding, etc. This is very important that we are able to enrich the information that they bring. So for sure, this is not a trip from the past to the future without challenges. And one challenge is the treatment of big data. Geospatial big data, location big data, is a bit smaller than the rest of the big data world because it's much more expensive in terms of computing capacity. So here, what we're trying to do mostly as a solution at Carto is to connect to existing big data stacks so that you can do the initial filtering of the data and drilling down in the usual Hadoop cluster or Spark or whatever you're using, and then that is the more reduced data set that you then can connect to Carto for your last mile visual data discovery and analysis. Or we are also trying to add your spatial plugin into a few of the most relevant big data stacks to do at least the initial spatial operations, like doing aggregation. In most cases, if you think about that, what you want to do with big data on your spatial is to aggregate per admin region, or aggregate per zip code, or aggregate in something you can understand, because the trillions of records or the trillions of logs are something you cannot comprehend geospatially. And for sure, and very important to us, is how we connect to the data science community, how we enable to do much more custom SQL nodes into our analytical workflows, or how we enable also connections to either Python through Jupyter notebooks or also to R, right? We need to be where our potential users are, right? And that enables us to really extend the analytical capabilities of Carto just much more than we could do ourselves. I jumped this one, but it's very important. We were talking about that before, right? I mean, you need to be able to visualize data in a way that is meaningful, in a way that tells the truth, and then do not lie with the graphs of the map, but also that shows what is hidden inside of the different data sets, that you're able to have contextual widgets, that you can also see the information in the filtering that tells you what is underneath. And lastly, I would like to just talk about where we see the future, right? I mean, the more data a tool and a platform like Carto and others can have about different potential human behaviors, the more data we have about real-time sensors with banking and telco data, the more we see the data in context and using the location vector as context, whenever you add a new data source, we can then recommend you how you can enrich your information, which other data sources that we have or that are in the market can help you to find your insights. And not just the data, also the analysis. We can tell you which kind of analysis makes sense for the type of data you have, the distribution of the data, to make the invisible visible, which is the key goal that we have at the end. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Miguel.
My pleasure.
It was a great presentation. Just coming back to how you're positioning yourself at Carto. So you said that you're a platform today, but just to better understand what's the secret sauce behind Carto is, and coming back to one question that was asked before for Vekia regarding algorithm, for the difficulty in your platform, is it related to the fact that you need to be connected to a lot of different data sets, a lot of different sensors, and so that's a challenge, and this is where you put your focus at the company level, or do you put a focus on the algorithm, or do you think that it's not your business and it's better to use off-the-shelf algorithm, and your main secret sauce is really to be interoperable and connected with all the different IoT devices and set of data that you can imagine or dream of?
Can I check just to all? No, right? I need to. So that's a very, very good question. And it goes to how we started, right? Carto was at the beginning only a visualization tool. So we tried to be very easy to use for as many people as possible. So we went through the tool, through the interfaces, easy to use interfaces or easy to use APIs to gain as many more users as possible. From there, we added the complexity of analytics. And now we're adding more and more data sources. If I can tell you, I think that the more data we have, more defensible we are, more valuable we are. There is a huge network effect on the data piece, but that's the last piece of our strategy. First, the tooling and the audience, then the analytics, then the data.
But again, as you said, if I am a customer of yours, for example, I have my own algorithm, I can plug my algorithm directly into your platform.
This is why I don't need to have all the algorithms myself yet, right? I need to have a connectivity with the algorithms first, but then my ultimate goal is to own the algorithms of most of the customers that I have in the future, or most of the data that I may have in the future.
And in terms of customers, can you describe your main use cases today? I mean, you gave some different use cases, but what are the main ones today, and the ones where you see the most value that you can bring?
Yeah, so it's mostly, our biggest verticals are mostly now banking and finance and telco and cities. These are the three key ones, right? Then we have a wide variety of different customers, but these are the three ones. If you think about banking and insurance, which is a similar case, it's always about the word optimization, how you can optimize your ATM network, how you can optimize your retail branches, to open or to close retail branches. That's for banking. If you think about telcos, it's about understanding the mobility patterns of people around the city, then how you can create data products for the city using telco data. And for cities, it's clearly the smart cities example I showed to you.
Okay, and sometimes you're using some private data, I mean data coming from the customer itself?
Most of the times, yes.
Okay, okay. And how do you see, just to get your view on that, I mean, all this issue about privacy, data privacy, it's not your business because it's up to your customer to solve that, or you putting also some constraint in your tool just to be compliant?
Yeah, it is part of our business. We cannot detach ourselves from that, right? I would say, funnily, because we are a cloud company, but a lot of our revenue comes from on-premises, because our biggest customers who are very sensible about data, like finance or telcos, they want everything to stay under their firewall, right? So we had to develop our own on-premises solutions to cover that. That's the first way to solve that. And we need to be very much aware of data security, roles, etc., because for sure that's primer.
Okay. Any question on the, yes, over there, excellent.
Hello, Mike. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm just curious to know why you've chosen to focus on location data and not on other kind of data.
Not just because it's beautiful, which it is, but there are like three components in data, I would say. It's the what, right? It's the when and the where. And the where has one beauty, which is the first law of geography, which says two very obvious things, is that everything is related with everything else. It's pretty obvious, but that closer things are more related than distant things. And that's super powerful, because thanks to location data, you can correlate disparate data sets. You can take banking data and telco data and demographics and drive insights. And you cannot do that without the location context. So this is why it's very important.
Yeah, there's a question, Alexandre, over there.
Hi, my name is Tanaka. I work for SoftBank Robotics.
Can you put it close?
My name is Tanaka. I work for SoftBank Robotics. My question, it's kind of a philosophical, ethical question.
Oh my goodness.
I see there's a lot of benefit in this location data, where you improve the conversion rate, improvement in phishings. But at the same time, I see where the rich become richer. Basically, I have a family member doing small businesses, and I just don't see them using this to get the benefit. So it's kind of like the rich become richer. As you say, the bank, telecom. How do you reach out to those segment, which is, and as you probably know, the less, I mean, the more poor you are, they're less accepting to technology. So. Like
It's a very good point, and it ties very nicely with my presentation. I mean, we have free plans, we have education plans, we are fully open source, so we are effectively free for anyone else who want to use that. So we are exactly in the idea of trying to democratize the access to this kind of technology and data to everybody. So that's one of the, and the easier you make it, not just from a pricing perspective, but also from a interfaces perspective, from a learning curve perspective, the better. So I would say, if there is any tool that enables your family member to use location data, it's probably Carto. But you are right, no matter what, that all this, the more data you have, the more you can understand human behavior, so the more you can probably then use it into your advantage, right? So this is about how much more data we can put into the hands of everybody, not just the tool, but also the data. And that is about the open data movement, and we are big proponents of that too. We try to, we use open data massively, OpenStreetMaps data, etc. But it's about how can we make all this information not be just in the hands of a few, but in the hands of everybody. So agreed.
Alexandre, there was a question still on the back over there. Yeah, thank you.
Hi. Can you tell me what's the difference between Carto and Google, or what's your relation between you and them? Thank you.
Yeah, so if you think about Google and the Google Maps API and all the products they have for mapping, they are mostly focused on the foundational pieces for a map on the web. The base map is what you see, the geocoding, where you transform an address into a latitude and longitude, this or routing, how you go from A to B, right? It's called in the industry location-based services. That's the most focus of Google. Carto, to put it in a simplified way, is the layer on top. So we can use Google Maps, or we can use Here Maps or OpenStreetMaps from open source data, and we add the data layer on top of that to do analytics and to drive insights. Yeah?
Any other question? Yes, over there.
Thank you. I have maybe a question which is, I will ask it bluntly. As a company, what's your business model so far?
Yeah, we are a SaaS business model. So we have these two different products, either the builder or the engine. Builder is being sold based on seats, like any other BI tool, etc. So the more seats you have within the organization, the more you pay, right? And engine is sold based on performance, number of cores, number of API calls that you do towards our system. So everything Carto is stored either on-premise or in the cloud, and this is the two ways that we have to sell it. Yep.
Okay. Just last one over there, and then we switch to Eric.
Hello. So what I'm wondering is that you've just shown us like the drag and drop interface that you have, but at the utter beginning, how did you decide to put sensors or to have certain data that you have bought from somewhere? Are your product is improving with the project of your clients, or how can you improve it?
Yeah, so we have the interface, and we have, in parallel to that, our data observatory, which is the data repository of data sources that we let our users, not just customers, get access to, right? That's mostly only open data. So we connect to open data sources from all around the world and make them accessible through the interface so that everybody can use them. But our data of our customers belongs to our customers. We cannot share this with anyone. That's just for them. Except if they want to resell it, anonymize and aggregate it, then we become, in a way, data brokers. So we resell their data on their behalf. But mostly it's open data, and the data to the customers belong to the customers, and nobody else can see it.
Okay, Miguel, thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Have a good trip back to New York or London, whatever.